Hello everybody, welcome into my latest live video. Today it is Wednesday, the 10th of August, 2022. My name is Kerry Holzman, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about the studio upgrade and have you help me out with configuring some things. This is about a $10,000 investment just with this new camera and this remote controller, which I'm going to talk about. And normally, the whole reason we got here is as a computer technician, I wanted to make videos to show people how easy it is to do basic maintenance on your computer, basic repairs, or even build your own computer and show people how easy it is and encourage them if they were sort of interested but maybe were a little intimidated by spending the money and afraid they might screw it up, and maybe better just not trying it. Once you see how simple it is, if you were at all considering it, that should absolutely convince you to tackle that. And in the process, my main goal back in 2008 when I made my first video was to simply show how to build a computer with every screw and every wire detailed, explaining why. I felt at the time most computer build videos skipped over very important steps. They took for granted the information they thought was basic that would not be basic to somebody who never had the information. So for example, they might say, after you install your motherboard into the case, the next step, well now wait a minute, how did you install the motherboard into the case? Is that so basic and so simple it's not even worth showing it? And so there were a lot of steps that were explained at that time on pretty much every video I saw on YouTube. Now I believe YouTube didn't even start till like 2005. I certainly don't believe I used it in 2005. Maybe might have used it in 2006. I definitely was using it in 2007. I was probably using it in 2006, but it still wasn't a very well-known platform. And was it 2005? Pretty sure it was 2005. And in that period, as YouTube was growing, it got really, really expensive to pay for all the bandwidth and the servers to store all the videos. Camera phones, of course, were not what they are today, and broadband isn't what it is today. And so if something like that were to be introduced today, it would have grown exponentially faster. But it was growing, and it was getting very expensive. And the founders ended up selling it to Google. And it was around that time that it really started gaining traction, and more people were going to that. And I thought, of all the platforms that were out for video, YouTube seemed to be the most promising because of the ownership of Google. So that kind of set a foundation for it that I said, okay, I'll make a video to put it on YouTube showing the way I wish somebody would have made a video on how to build a computer. And prior to my career in computers, I was very much into videography and photography, but it was very expensive. So I started out as a hobbyist playing with my Atari computer, and even in high school with the Commodore PET and the Apple II, I believe it was. I did some coding, and I talk about that past history. But it really wasn't a career. If I told people I had a computer, they'd say, why do you have that? And the whole reason I had it was purely financial. I liked to play video games. In the arcade, it was a quarter per play. And if I had $5, that was 20 quarters. And I tried to stretch that out for as long of the day as possible. And you can imagine how upset I would be when I'm playing a new game and 30 seconds later, my 3 lives have gone and that quarter was gone in under a minute. So I was trying to be very careful over how I invested my quarters to get the most amount of entertainment to get me through the day. And the home computers at the time, like the game consoles, the Atari 2600, they just weren't that good. The graphics were blah compared to the arcade. So when I saw the Atari home computer and I saw the quality of the games and how close they looked to the arcade, it just made sense. I had to have one. Saved my paper route money and bought it. And I played a lot of games. at home where it was a lot cheaper. Now, they weren't exactly emulated from the original, so a lot of the game patterns and rules that you'd learn in the arcade absolutely did not apply on the Atari computer or the home version, but at least it looked really, really good. Still not quite as good as the arcade, but so much better than all the other platforms. So that was my motivation. But what I really, really wanted to do was I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be the next Steven Spielberg or George Lucas. In 1977, when Star Wars came out, there was nothing to compare it to. It positively blew my 9-year-old brain in a way that is beyond words. It wasn't a gradual introduction to the special effects that George Lucas introduced to the world. It was absolutely and profoundly mind-blowing that all the movies and TV shows I had watched that were science fiction up until that point were often very cold, very sterile. Everything was always clean, everything always worked. Everybody had to wear these uniforms. If you're talking about Space 1999, even Lost in Space, the family's on the ship, it's a family, it's like 5 people, and yet they're wearing their uniforms. Like, who would know if they just wore a t-shirt and some underpants? Who are they wearing the uniform for? And then, of course, shows like Star Trek. I never was into Star Trek. I never liked it. It just felt, I don't know. It just didn't connect with me, that this whole military aspect of it. And again, it had sort of a cheap feel to it. Everything was always shiny and clean. Every time they went somewhere, there's never any bugs or birds or wind. And, nothing at that time really conveyed that honestly. The closest I got was maybe Doctor Who, and that was mostly about the stories. The special effects were horrible, but the stories were quite interesting to me. And so I really enjoyed Doctor Who. But that came later. So even Doctor Who I didn't know anything about until in the 1980s. So in 1977, I'm watching Looney Tunes cartoons, Speed Racer, Johnny Sacco and his flying robot, Ultraman, Godzilla movies, lots and lots of Godzilla movies, and really enjoyed those. And Lost in Space, although I wasn't a big fan of it. If it was on, I'd watch it. There's only like 4 channels to pick from. So when Star Wars came out, it introduced the way that the lasers, the guns, the ships, the scale, things lived in, worn out, damaged and repaired, and things didn't always work. The musical score was amazing and incredible. The story itself, well, quite basic, was fully understandable to my 9-year-old brain, and all of this hit at once with nothing to really compare it to. These days, when we're looking at a movie or a TV show, we often are introduced to something different amongst everything else being the same. And the only other movie I can think of in my lifetime that introduced a bunch of new storytelling techniques and special effects would be The Matrix. But when I saw that Keanu Reeves was in The Matrix, I had no interest in it because he just looked like a dumb surfer dude, California surfer dude, and him playing a nerd, I wasn't buying it. So I wasn't interested. I later rented the movie and watched it at home and was kicking myself in the butt for not having seen it in the theater, because The Matrix, again, an amazing score, never before seen visual effects that were very original, and for the first time ever, and I was into anime as well, but not all anime, just like the really good anime, like Akira and stuff like that, blew my mind. So when I saw The Matrix, I saw them making a live action anime, which never occurred to me that anybody would do that or be so effective at it. And again, a very interesting storyline and a whole new respect for Keanu Reeves as an actor. I had sort of pigeonholed him unfairly, unfair to him and unfair to me. So those 2 movies, introduced a bunch of new ideas and new special effects techniques that everybody has since copied. right? They set a new bar. But these days, typically, there's a science fiction movie that comes out. They'll do something in it that might be amazing. Maybe they brought an actor back to life, and you can't tell, the CGI is so good. Or they introduce some new technique or some new way of expressing an effect, and that's normal, right? It's sort of everything's familiar, and there's one thing that's different. And what made Star Wars and The Matrix stand out for me was that the directors of these movies figured out a way to tell that story and to show those special effects in a way that no one had ever thought of that before. And what George Lucas and his special effects team had to do to get those effects was incredibly painstaking compared to what we can do today. So, it was very, very, very time consuming and very experimental, and it paid off. And of course, that set a new bar for other filmmakers to mimic. And it's almost pretty standard and routine these days to film with certain techniques that were introduced by George Lucas. So I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to think of something that I could tell a story and use camera angles or visual effects in a unique way that is my voice, my creative and artistic talent, to do it in a way that was uniquely mine, right? Quentin Tarantino has a unique style. John Waters has a unique style. Steven Spielberg has a unique style. Michael Bay, you can kind of always tell a Michael Bay movie. There are certain movements that a director, camera movements, that a director is almost, that utilize all the time. And you can almost tell with certain directors, without having any prior knowledge, oh, that looks like J.J. Abrams did this. There's lens flares in every scene, or the people are reacting to something off camera and they won't show you what it is. Another J.J. Abrams technique. Not that other people don't do it, but that he's most well known for that technique, and he does it a lot, or at least he used to. So I thought I would love to explore what techniques I might come up with. I didn't have any ideas, but the first concept is, of course, understanding the cameras and how lighting and everything that's involved in good filmmaking. And so I took a videography class at college back in, it was probably late 80s, I want to say. And so everything was VHS camcorders. And I loved it. It was so much fun. And our what do they call that? At the end of it was like a midterm, a final, and then a final test. There were two major tests for the semester. And the first video I did, which was the submission for the midway point, it was okay. And then the final one I was really super proud of, and I wish I could find it and show it to you, but it's basically a music video to a song called Chains of Love by Erasure. And I worked with another classmate on it, and we got a bunch of other college departments involved in making it. And it was all shot and edited on VHS tape with equipment I could never have afforded. So I got to play with this fancy editing equipment. And I'm sure if I look back on it now, it's probably gonna seem real cheesy and the audio's probably not great, but I loved it. I loved it so much. And I loved the potential that it held. But unfortunately, you really have to be in Southern California for the most opportunity, or perhaps New York. A lot of people that are big directors in Southern California graduated, what's the university there? Not UCLA, but I can't think of it, but Lucas was from there, Spielberg, I think Francis Ford Coppola, a bunch of big directors. USC, I think is what it is. And so that wasn't in the cards for me. And when I found out the most likely job opportunity as a director here in Phoenix would be making training videos for corporations. You know, the example I was specifically given was U-Haul. I don't know why. U-Haul's headquarters are in Phoenix, but the instructor of the class said, you know, be prepared. If you think you're going to go make a big budget Hollywood picture, it ain't happening in Phoenix. You got to move. You got to go over there. If you're going to stay in Phoenix, your most likely opportunity for a job would be like making videos for a corporation here for the employees. So I was like, oh, that sounds horrible. That's the opposite of what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be told what to do. I wanted to express visually with the camera a way of telling a story. So if I had a good script that I liked, I could picture in my head how I would shoot it differently. In corporate America, if you're making a sexual harassment training video that's mandatory for all new hires to watch, I have no interest in making that video. So anyway, so then I got into the field of auto mechanics and started studying that in college because that seemed like that was going to be a good paying career and it was attainable to me. And while that happened, I was still, you know, I had a VHS camcorder. I spent $1,000 for it. It was the cheapest one, $1,000. And I just enjoyed filming stuff all the time in my spare time. And then I got into combustion internal, what was it called? Internal combustion engine theory was one of the classes. And then it was an engine rebuilding class. And I was getting ready to become an ASE certified mechanic and go work at, like, you know, it was a GM sponsored a facility at the college. So they had all this fancy equipment. Well, all that was going on. Computers kind of started taking hold. And through a series of events that occurred, became my career. And then my hobbies still were photography, filmmaking, and auto mechanics. But the auto mechanics I hated, really. I mean, I didn't like getting dirty. And, you know, when you're out there in the Phoenix heat, you know, my neighbor used to make fun of me because I'd start working on my car at 9 o'clock at night. He's like, how can you see, you know? I have a big reflective light plugged into an outlet outside. But the weather was cooler, and so that's what I preferred. Anyway, when the YouTube thing sort of, when I made that first video, it was just very, very basic. It was a very simple handheld Canon $100 standard definition camcorder about the size of a can of Coca-Cola, which was great to take on vacations and to play with. And I thought I'll use this and make the video and show people how to build a computer, you know, edit it, publish it, etc. Now back then, videos could only be a maximum of 15 minutes, and I don't think monetization was a thing. And so I had to split the video up into separate parts. I think there were 6 parts total. And I would look at the analytics on this video, and it just didn't make sense to me. Part 1 would have, let's say, 4,000 views. Part 2 would have, let's say, 800 views. Part 3 would have 7,000 views, and Part 4 would have 3,000 views. And I'm thinking to myself, shouldn't the first part be the most viewed? And then whether or not people choose to continue watching it, right, then everything else should be the same or lower than the first one. That's not the way the internet works, and it's not the way YouTube works. And I think the people at that time were just stumbling on the individual parts without realizing there was a part 1, or they didn't understand how to go from part 1 to part 2. They couldn't figure out how to do it. And at that time, at least as far as I know, YouTube did not have the ability to put like an end card or a link to the next video in the video itself. That was yet to come. But what ended up happening is, you know, first of all, I was disappointed. I was confused. And it was a lot harder to do than I thought. But then it started gaining traction after about a year. And I hadn't done any other videos. I did 2 how to build. I think one was AMD and one was Intel. And I did them both relatively timing-wise. You know, I had nothing, and then I created the one and then created the other one. I think I did the AMD one first, and then I did the Intel one second. And I figured, you know, if anybody searches for it, hopefully they'll find it. And that was the end of that. After about a year, Google had mailed me a check, and I thought it was a scam. And it was like you had to earn $100 minimum before they would send you a check. And apparently I had signed up for this, I don't know, it was a year ago, right? And I was sure this was some fresh scam. And I started using Google to figure out what the scam is, only to find out that in fact it was real. So it was a little over $100. And this is probably sometime in, I would say mid-2008. It was over a year since I had posted those videos, and I really didn't go back. It was just sort of like, that's all I wanted to do, and I did it. But now that I saw I made money from that, from work I did over a year and a half ago, that's what we call passive income, right? It's like what an artist gets when they sell a record. You know, the estates of Michael Jackson and Elvis Presley earn more money now than the artists did when they were alive. So there's these royalties, right? This passive income comes in. The same is true with actors when they appear in a sitcom and then that gets franchised afterwards. Those actors can have residuals coming in for the rest of their life. And in some cases, it can be making more money now than when they were making the show, depending on how many markets it goes into. And so I was like, well, that's really a smart way to earn money. You know, do it once and keep profiting from it in the same way they do with movies, music, books. So I got to make more videos. This is real. This is exciting. And I thought to myself, what else could I make? And it occurred to me, show people how to build modern computers using modern parts, right? Because that other video was a year and a half old. Get a better camcorder, shoot it in HD. Eventually, you know, get a microphone. The in-camera microphone was terrible. And things just kept growing and growing and growing. So everything you see here on this channel is purely organic. It's very, very unusual that anybody living in the world today online, being a creator, wouldn't manipulate the search engine, you know, do search engine optimization and keywords and play around with titles and thumbnails like Mr. Beast. Very, very good at analyzing all of that to figure out what's the most effective way to get the most amount of viewers. That was never my goal, never. I wasn't opposed to it, but I wasn't going to pander to what people wanted to see. I wanted to make things that I was genuinely interested in, and I wanted to make it in a way that was uniquely me. And I was just hopeful that there'd be some people out there who got it and appreciated it for what it was. Well, here we are. It's been 14 years. We're closing in on 400,000 subscribers, all organically. We have this amazing community, which was never even a concept in my mind, that to me is far more valuable than any amount of content that I make. And so, for the last couple of years, I had been really, really focusing on growing the channel, trying to produce a lot of content, because that's a general accepted rule of thumb on YouTube. If you want to be successful on YouTube, if you want to grow, you've got to post content often. YouTube is a hungry, hungry monster. And if you look at the number of videos the big channels crank out, they're releasing more than the average content creator. And in many cases, some have grown to the point where they've hired staff to help with creating and editing and posting and doing the search engine optimization and getting sponsorship deals and getting camera operators and editors. And, you know, they've become full media companies. And again, that wasn't my goal. My goal is not to be a media company. My goal was simply to join my two passions, which are computers and filming. And if I get a chance to film Subaru Mike, that's also a passion of mine, so that he can be the on-camera talent. And as he's describing things, because I'm familiar with the parts of an engine, I don't have to be surprised with where he's moving around the engine to get to that part. So as a camera operator with experience and knowledge about car engines, I know what he's talking about when he says the oil pump, or he's talking about the crankshaft or the camshaft or the lifters. You know what I'm saying? Like, not everybody would necessarily, somebody who's a camera operator may not fully understand what it is they're being filmed, and they have to be told, you need to focus on this part right here. So with me and Mike, it was really a lot of fun for me to join in now 3 passions: the engine work, the video work, and YouTube. So it's weird how life kind of works this out. I had no idea this was going to happen. So for the last 2 years, I was really working on the content as much as possible. I thought, with the pandemic and everybody being at home, in theory, there should be more people hanging out on YouTube or looking for something to watch, especially when a lot of TV and film production were shut down. I thought, this is a great opportunity. Now let's just start cranking out the content. And I had already upgraded the camera equipment a number of times, and the microphone, since then. So I started to fall into a little bit of burnout, where the builds were just, they weren't exciting for me anymore. It started to feel very repetitive, but at the same time, I had committed to all of these builds, and I have to finish them. I have yet to have been able to find a reliable source that can help me do the work. You know, the way I met Mitch was his offer to be a cameraman for me on the original Threadripper build, which was I was going to say it was the first community build, but the first community build was the Xenos build, which it hasn't been finished. And the reason is because there's no customer for it. And I've had to pull all the parts out of it 3 times, or at least twice. I think we're on our 3rd motherboard CPU, because it gets postponed so long that it doesn't make any sense to continue such a beautiful and modern and expensive computer case with old obsolete parts. It doesn't fit. So if we're going to do it, buy new parts. So I certainly wasn't going back to the community and asking for more contributions, because I hadn't delivered what I'd promised to begin with. So everything regarding the Xenos build has been totally footed by me. I've not asked anybody anymore regarding that build. And even the creator, John Xenos, I felt really bad about the fact that it wasn't part of my plan to have it take so long. But when business and customers are waiting, that has to be a priority for me. I was hopeful that I would eventually get some help, but that never happened. And so it waited and waited and waited. And so I called up John and I said, look, I don't want you to think this was some elaborate scam to get you to send me a case for free. So let me just go ahead and pay for it, so you understand that this has not worked out the way I wanted it to. I am still going to feature your case for many, many, many years to come. But if there was any doubt in your mind as to whether or not you were taken to the cleaners, just let me pay for it, and I don't have that burden on my shoulders anymore. And he said, no, absolutely not. I am absolutely fine with what you're doing. I understand it. And you know, you'll get to it when you get to it. And if there's anything you need, anytime, you reach out to me. So you couldn't ask for a better situation than that. So he didn't pay me to do it, but he did send me basically a $2,000 case. Then he also created a addition to the case to hold a liquid cooler that was custom designed and CNC'd, and it's profoundly beautiful, so unique. Now some people will say it's ugly, But that's true of any piece of art. In fact, if everybody agreed it was beautiful, then I would feel like it's not as special, that it met some sort of corporate expectation of being homogenized to everybody's liking. The fact that it stands out as being very different and how it's done, I just think that's the best case ever I've ever seen. And some people are like, oh, it's super ugly. Okay, good. I'm glad it evokes a response. I don't expect the Corsair 200R, which is just a plain old black box with no window and no RGB, to evoke any response at all. It's sort of non-offensive and conforming, and it's really good for businesses, right? But I don't know that anybody would say it's beautiful, and I don't know that anybody would say it's ugly. It's just a black box. So the very fact that there are people out there that think that Zeno's case is horrifically ugly pleases me, because that makes it even more beautiful to me, that they don't see it. The beauty is so refined that you have to have a special sense of identifying it when you see it. And I truly believe those who think it's ugly are missing the point of it. That's why they think it's ugly. They don't, it's just right over their head. And that's fine. That's fine. So after the last 2 years of really just kind of cranking away at systems, being super busy, trying to get caught up, like I said, I still have, I think, 29 systems left. I was up over 60 this time last year. And I'm trying to stop creating new projects so I can finish the ones I started. And once all those 29 are gone, and assuming I don't bury myself in work again, I can bring out the Zeno system and start using it. Which takes us to today's video. In a desperate bid to do something different, I wanted to upgrade the camera equipment, and specifically here for Studio B, because it had been a while, and I had no complaints. You know, the XF400 cameras I'm using are fantastic cameras. I love these cameras, and they were a very good investment for me in the way that I use them. They have worked out really, really well. The investment I've made into the Sennheiser wireless microphone system and the $600 DPA lapel mics, totally worth it. One of the best decisions I ever made in investing in the channel. But I needed to do something different, and it had been a long time since I made any studio improvements. You know, just getting the internet up and running over here took me almost a year to find a reliable internet source. Finding a workbench, that was a whole nother battle, and I ended up spending 3 times what I had budgeted for it. And if anything, I wish I could have got one that's a little bit lower. This one's a bit high, so to lift things up can be a bit difficult. But it's far more beautiful and elegant than what I was planning to buy. And so it was time for me now to start making improvements here at Studio B, and that includes getting this off the workbench. This was never meant to be here permanently, and certainly not for the last 2 years. It was just to kind of show it off. But I can still show it off if it's behind me. And I wasn't quite sure if I was going to get a shelving unit or not. I don't know how long Studio B will be available to me. I keep telling you that. I could literally be told I have to get out today. And I've been saying that for, what, 2 years now. But you can imagine it's a little bit stressful that I don't want to put anything permanent or large and heavy here, because sooner or later it will have to come out. But when I got the neon sign, that helped fill the space back here, and that meant there was no room for a shelf anymore. And I wasn't quite sure anyway, because the depth, the amount of space I have between the end of the desk and that wall is already, you know, it's a good 4 feet away, maybe 5 feet. And so to shorten that up and cut it in half with a shelf, it's going to feel a little confined for me. That means I have to move everything forward, but then I hit the other wall on the other side, and then the studio is too small. So I just set everything up good enough. Let's get to work. Let's get back to making videos. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years. Now, feeling the burnout, kind of being bored, I said, I want to get a new camera. Let's find out what the best camera from Canon. I always buy Canon equipment. That way all the parts and cables and batteries are all usually interchangeable. And I'm familiar with the menu system. So I saw the Canon XF605, the XF705. The XF705, $7,000. The XF605, $4,500. So immediately I know I want the 705 that's obviously newer and obviously better. After I bought it, started playing with it, one of the reasons I wanted it was with each camera upgrade I can get into more settings details that you don't get on the lower end cameras. So each time I get to a better camera, I have settings to control the image that I didn't have before. So with the XF705, as I was reading about it, I was like, wow, this is great. If I want to put everything on auto, then it would be no different than any other camcorders. But if I want to manually control stuff, I can manually control so much more with this camera. So I get the camera, and I'm a little frustrated that it's so different from all the other Canon cameras I'm familiar with. And then I figure out, I think a viewer or a couple of you told me that camera's like 4 years old. Like, how can that be 4 years old? So I start to Google it and find out that the Canon XF605 just came out like last year and sells for $4,600. And the main difference between them is that this camera records in HEVC, the video codec that allows a lot of compression so that this can record on the memory card 4K video at a higher frames per second that the memory card can keep up with. Because otherwise you go to record it, if your memory card can't write the data as fast as you're creating it, you're going to lose frames, you're going to have corrupted files, and what you shoot isn't going to be what you recorded. So that X265 format was very, very unique for Canon to introduce that. And I thought, that's great, I love it. The 605 doesn't have that, but it does have a newer imaging processor, which might have benefited me. And the layout of the XF705, where it's got one XLR mic input at the front and one at the back, bothers me. Even the switches for setting those options up on each XLR input are located by the input. So you have on the XF400, for example, you've got all the buttons and dials right below both XLR inputs. And on the XF605, both XLR inputs are side by side. So all the controls for input 1 and input 2 are right next to each other. And since I want my audio for both input 1 and input 2 on the XLR side to be exactly the same, it really annoys me that I've got to go to the back of the camera to adjust the XLR2, the XLR input number 2 settings, and to the front of the camera where I'm accustomed for the XLR input 1 settings. And why did they do this? This is so stupid. Then the view screen. I'm used to, on all my Canon cameras, I can flip the view screen towards me so I can see it when I'm filming. And the image will automatically rotate, because otherwise it would be upside down, including all the data on the screen. But on the XF705, it's really not meant for a single operator. And so when you flip the screen, it's upside down, and there is a button on the back of the viewfinder that says mirror, and you press that and it flips the image, but all of the text information goes away, and there is no way to bring it back other than to flip the image back upside down. Now again, that doesn't happen on the lesser Canon cameras, and I can only surmise the reason that Canon did this is this camera is intended to have a camera operator. So I'm learning all this, and I'm really intrigued by it. And part of me is like, you know, I could send the 705 back, get the 605 instead, save the money. But I still like that option of that HEVC encoding, because I may not always use this camera strictly for live. There's other things I want to do for my interest in filmmaking, and this camera has the ability to do stuff that I'm not doing yet, but I might want to, now that I know that I can. So a viewer said, you know, you can get a remote controller for the XF705 so that you don't have to keep going around behind it and flipping the screen and go into the menus and make all the settings changes. And I thought they were talking about this little remote that the Canon cameras come with that's pretty useless for me. It enables me to turn the recording on or off, to take a photo, to adjust the zoom, and to hit for playback. It's really useless. So I dismissed their comment. You know, I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I stumbled on this guy on YouTube. His YouTube channel is MarkusPix, and I've got a link to his video in the video notes below this video. And MarkusPix, he's worked in Hollywood, and he's an artist, and he loves cameras, video cameras, still cameras, all different kinds, APS-C cameras, full frame cameras. The cheap $16 camcorders you can get on Amazon. This guy has literally hundreds of cameras, hundreds of lenses, hundreds of microphones, and a relatively small subscription base. I mean, this guy is chock full of grounded, useful information that I wish I had known about sooner. And I highly recommend, if you're interested in cameras or lighting or microphones or photography or videography, filmmaking, go check out MarkusPix channel, subscribe to his channel. He does a lot of giveaways there of camera equipment. And this is like a kindred spirit. And he started talking about this remote control that I've got in front of me here. And I was like, whoa, I didn't even, what is that? Well, that's what the viewer was trying to tell me if I was listening, which was, this will give you all the controls you want for that camera, which was the whole reason you bought it. Okay, so how much is this? Well, brand new, these are about $1,850 with sales tax. You're probably looking close to $2,000. And all you get for $2,000 is you get this box and you get a cable. Well, I looked on eBay and I found a place or a person selling a used one for $1,099. Well, that's a big savings. And they said it was in good shape. It had very minimal wear. They had good feedback. I went ahead and I ordered it. So it came in, but it didn't come with the cable. So then I emailed him and said, hey, do you have the cable for this? He's like, no, that's why I didn't say in the listing that it came with a cable, which I thought was a little nasty. The cable, as it turns out, is proprietary. Canon says it's proprietary. When you look through the instruction manuals, when you buy a Canon product, usually if there's like a lens cap or a hood, it's got a Canon part number with its description. But this cable, when it's talked about in the manual for this, says it's a 2.5 millimeter to 3.5 millimeter cable that is 5 meters in length and comes included with the remote. Without the cable, the remote is absolutely useless. So it's okay. So I reach out to Canon and I say, what's the part number? Because I can't find this cable. You guys don't seem to sell it. There's no mention of it. There's nothing. There's no mention that this cable exists outside of the fact that it's included with this remote. They said, here's the part number. That cable is $97.21 plus tax plus shipping, and you'll have to contact Canon over the phone. We can't handle this through email. So then I call Canon and I say, I want to order the cable. The remote is still made and sold today. This is not obsolete. The guy says, do you have a part number? And I gave him the part number. He says, wow, I cannot believe you have that part number, because he looked for it. He couldn't find it. But he said, yep. He put the part number in the computer. That's exactly what came up. 5 meter cable, 2.5 millimeter on one end, 3.5 millimeter on the other. 5 meters in length, $97.21 plus tax plus shipping. Great, I'm gonna need one of those, please. He says, they don't appear to be made anymore. What? Yeah, it doesn't look like we make this cable anymore. Okay, so for everybody who invested in your equipment, who lost the cable or damaged the cable, this is just a doorstop then? He's like, you know, that's a good question. I'll have to talk to the repair center and I'll get back to you. I have yet to hear back from him. So I thought, I wonder if this is just a regular 2.5 millimeter to 3.5 millimeter cable that's used in audio. You go on Amazon, it sells for about $1 a foot. A 10-foot cable should cost 10 bucks. A 15-foot cable should be 15 bucks. You know, is that all this is? And Canon is making it out to be something so special that it's $97 plus tax plus shipping. And then further, they don't even make it anymore, even though you can still go online and buy these brand new. So for $10, I thought I'd give it a shot. That's why this cable is red and not black. And it doesn't have the right angled connector. So who cares that the Canon one is? So the cable came in yesterday and I plugged it in and it works. It works perfectly. It's just an ordinary 2.5 to 3.5 millimeter cable. Only this cable's only about 10 feet and I really need it at about 15 feet. So I didn't want to, first of all, it was the longest 2.5 to 3.5 cable I could find on Amazon. And I wasn't quite sure if it was going to work, and that way I could send it back if it didn't work. I know Amazon will take it back. Not that it's a big investment, but you know, what else am I going to do with it if it doesn't work? And if it does work, then I'll go back to Amazon and I'll find a regular headphone extension, which is basically a 3.5 millimeter female on one side and a 3.5 millimeter male on the other, and just buy a 10-foot extension and I'll have 20 feet worth of cable. It's no problem. So as you can imagine, I was quite delighted to be able to verify that what I bought off of eBay for $1,100 is functional, and that Canon treats their customers like they're idiots and has a massive markup on just a basic audio cable, very common audio cable. There's absolutely nothing special about it. Phew. All right. Let me show you why I'm so excited about this, because it goes back to why I wanted this camera. And that was for all of the major controls I have on the image. So this remote allows me to make changes. Now, for example, it's not on autofocus right now because I was playing with this. But I do have a focus button or dial here, and I can turn this dial one way or the other. And if the remote's not responding, there's a button down here that says active. We just push the active button to kind of wake it up. And let's see if I can. I'm just manually, wrong button, wrong dial. Okay, here's our focus. Look at that. So all I'm doing is I'm turning the focus button here. And look at all these controls I have, from setting the white balance, the black levels. I can even bring up the entire menuing system on the camera right here on screen. Never mind, I can't see it on the camera's view screen. But now I can bring it up on my big master monitor in big, font and super easy to see. And I thought we'd play with this together today because I feel like a boy with a new toy and I'm so excited to play with it. And I want to share this with you because this is why this purchase was important to me. Now you can definitely see the focus change. That's really obvious, right? So I'm going to reach over here and I'm going to start playing with the focus. Turning it to the right. Here we go. Look at this. Now prior to this, I would just leave it on autofocus and deal with it, or I'd have to step around back behind the camera and mess with it there. With this, I can do so much more. And I can get your feedback as I'm making the adjustments here live and really dial in the settings that are, universally agreed upon. So let's play. Sarge Tech says if you press the wrong button, the stream blows up. Well, this is not connected in any way to OBS, but yeah, like the stream link, in theory, I could shut the whole stream down by hitting the wrong stream link button. But with this, it's really just about being able to take full advantage of this camera and the really granular settings that I can fine tune far beyond what I could do with any other camcorder. Now, MarkusPix does show comparing the XF605 with the Sony R100 Mark VII, which is a little pocket camera. And in many ways, that Sony picture is superior out of the box, but it's extraordinarily limited to what changes you can make because it's a pocket camera. So if you're just looking for something you can take out of your pocket and set it up and you don't want to, it's good enough, that $1,300 point and shoot Sony camera is, the picture quality out of the box is incredible. No argument for me there. But the amount of little details I can change on this camera, and now I can do it right here. And I can set this over to the side because once I dial it in theory, I shouldn't have to touch it anymore. But if I do, it's no big deal. So let me give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Right here, I've got a button that says on screen. And if I press it, look at, I get all the information. I can see, I'm plugged into microphone input 2, so you can see that bar moving up and down as the camera is receiving the audio. And then, of course, in OBS, I'm processing it and raising the gain and putting the noise reduction into it. But that does verify for me that if I'm having an audio issue, is the audio happening at the microphone? Because if so, that little bar that's moving when I talk will just lay flat like the one number 1 is doing. So I know my batteries have died, or I know where to go look for the source of the problem. And it's great to have that on the screen just to kind of glance from time to time. I also have the color temperature on the screen. I have the color correction, the f-stop aperture, the gain on the video, the auto exposure correction is at plus 0.25 down there at the bottom. Shutter speed is at 1/30th. I prefer that to be at 29.97, but I can adjust all of that right here now. There's also an ND filter that these cameras have that I don't like using the ND filter, but it's basically like putting a dark tinted filter over your lens to block the amount of light coming in. And the best way I would explain this is if you are ever watching a video where somebody's in a car driving through a tunnel. As they're reaching the end of the tunnel, all you can see is brightness. You cannot see what mountains or road lie ahead because there's too much light coming into the camera and it's already adjusted for being in the tunnel. So the lens is open wide to bring in more light, and the light that's coming in from outside is washed out. And so by using an ND filter, you can darken that. And while you're in the tunnel then with the ND filter on, you can then see the way you would see it if you were in the car. So this has 5 levels of ND filter. And if I hit the ND filter button, you'll see that the image will get a little darker. You see a little movement of the piece moving in front of the lens in the camera. And then each time I press it, it'll get a little darker. And then we go back to off. So that's a button I'm probably never going to use, right? That's really for outdoor shooting. Nelson Contreras has just posted a link that's drawn my attention here. Monoprice has a cable. I love Monoprice. I haven't shopped there in a long time. And I found a lot of the Monoprice cables available at Amazon, so I quit going to Monoprice. But let me click on that link and see if it's what I think it is. Oh, it's just taking me to Monoprice. 2.5 millimeter to 3.5 millimeter. Those are adapters I can plug at the end of the cable, but if I could get basically the same thing that Sony sells, which is 5 meters and right angled on both sides, that would be ideal. I could build one. It'd be no big deal for me to get a soldering iron, buy the connectors, and make the darn thing. It's that basic of a cable. But I don't see anything on monoprice that is a 15-foot or longer cable that at one end is 3.5 millimeter and on the other end is 2.5. I just see the adapters. And you know what? The adapters may work fine, but I think I'll just go with the extension cable, and as long as that works, good enough. But I appreciate the link and the idea. Okay, so getting back to where I was here, thank you, shout out to Jamie McGregor, who just became a member of the channel for 4 months. And he says, hello, Carrie and everyone from Scotland. Hey, Jamie, thanks for becoming a member here. Alan Lindos contributes $7.77. He says, hi, Carrie and chat. I'm sorry I'm late. Here's my late fee. Right on, Alan. Thanks for joining us. So let's play with these settings. And I do know that some of you mentioned the audio is a little low. We're going to get to that. And first thing I want to do is just play with the settings a little bit. And it will help if you make sure you're at least watching this in 720 and preferably 1080p resolution. And you'll do that by hitting the little gear icon. Just below the video to the right, you'll see a little cog or a gear. And make sure your resolution is at the maximum that your bandwidth can handle. So ideally, you're going to be watching in 1080. Now, understand if you're not watching in 1080, it doesn't just affect the video, but it affects the audio as well. So something may not look good to you until you make that change, and that it's not on my end. It's not a setting on my side. If you have 1080 enabled and it's not looking right, then it's more likely a setting on my side, right? So let's make sure we're all on the same page of how we're evaluating the image and audio quality, okay? And if you want to help, you know, I appreciate it. So, all right. So getting back to this, let's play with this a little bit, and we'll get to the audio after that. Now, things that I frequently need to change would be something like the white balance, the black gamma levels, and if we just start at the top, there are custom picture settings. Shutter select, I can hit the button for the shutter, and at the bottom right corner, you'll see it says the letter A, and it says 1/30th. So that's telling me the shutter is in an automatic mode. That's what the A is telling us. And the shutter select button, I should be able to press, and you'll see the A just went away. Now if I press it again, it says 1:30 and it's highlighted in orange. Now this is what it would do on screen, but it's super tiny, and I wasn't aware that items were turning orange, and that's why I couldn't figure out where the settings were in the menu. And I did a little research on it and come to find out you got to look for that little orange box. And of course it requires me to flip the view screen around the other way and hit the mirror button to rotate the image. Anyway, so this is so much better than that. So let's go back to shutter select. I'll press it again. Now it's 180 degrees. Hit it again. 29.97, which is where I would prefer it. Hit it again. It's 1/8, and you'll see what it's doing when we change the shutter. And we'll press it again. We're back to a 1/30th in automatic. I'm not sure what the 180 degrees does, but 29.97 hertz. That's where I want it, and that should make the image nice and smooth. You don't see those tails anymore. Then we come over here, and we have color bars. So if we want to make an adjustment to the colors, we can certainly do that. And this camera does have a fan on it. And that's what those little point and shoots kind of will fall short, is when you're making videos longer than 10 or 15 minutes, you could have an overheating issue. It's quite common. So these camcorders, they're designed to run for indefinitely. I could leave it on all weekend, no problem. It won't ever overheat. Then we have our ISO or gain, right? So if I hit that button, you'll see just to the left of where it says 29.97, you'll see the A and it says 6 dB, and the picture got a little darker, but it's with the A, it's adjusting automatically. And if I want to turn that off, it's called AGC or auto gain control. I should be able to I'm raising it. So the ND, you'll see ND light up and flash. That says you're bringing in too much light. Turn the ND filter on. So that tells me the gain is too high. So we want to bring that gain back down. And so the gain and the iris and the shutter speed all combined affect the brightness of the image and how fluid the image is and how smooth the image is, right? So now we've got a sharpness level. So I'm going to just leave that right there for now. I want to, because it was at 12 dB. It's at 27 dB right now. It's a little bit high. Let me just bring that back down to 12. 24, 21, 18, 15, 12. If I zero out the gain, you can see I don't have enough light in the room for to not issue any gain to the picture. And so the darker the room is, the more I can bring the gain up and make the video image brighter. So right about 12 dB is ideal. Above that it says AE plus 0.25. That's our auto exposure, and that we're adding a 0.25 to the exposure. But again, we can play with all of this stuff. There's something called knee point. So if I rotate knee point, look at the back wall, how it's changing, becoming brighter. I've never really heard this term knee point and knee slope. I'm not familiar with those terms. So I can kind of play with that. Into the knee slope, once again, rotating it to the right and to the left. And then next to that, we have our black gamma levels. Now this, no way I can do this stuff with these other cameras. As I adjust the black levels, you can see how the shadows, particularly like the wrinkles here in my shirt, how that darkens. We can go the other way and lighten it, and then it can kind of look a bit washed out. And so these adjustments are very, very precise. And it's maddening to have to step around behind the camera and use the view screen, because the view screen's too small to capture some of the subtle changes that it's making. But it's those subtle changes that can make all the difference in the world. Then we can adjust the sharpness. We can bring the sharpness down and soften everything. Or we can adjust the sharpness all the way up. That's all the way up. And everything might look a little edgy, like if you look at my shoulders to the background, like right now, and if I turn the sharpness the other way, it sort of flattens it. It's so soft that the sharpness between me and the back wall kind of smooths out, and the depth isn't quite as good. That is zoom. I was trying to reach for the sharpness level, but just below that is a dial called zoom. And the way this works is if I turn the zoom to the right and just leave it there, then it'll start zooming in at that speed. The more I turn the knob, the faster the zoom moves. If I turn the knob directly into the middle, it stops. And if I go to the left just a little bit, I can dial it in. And once again, I get to do all of this right here, looking at the changes on the major big screen here, so I can really see those changes. Now, to me, the picture still looks a little bit dark. I think me messing with that knee point. Brighten that up just a little bit. Maybe something like that. And I'm always interested in your feedback. The way your monitor is displaying the image will vary as well. So do bear in mind that if something looks oversaturated or overly bright, it may be just the way your monitor is configured. So I'm kind of looking for a consensus from people who all agree, and then I will adjust that. So hopefully we find a good, comfortable middle for that. Now, beyond that, as I mentioned, I've got controls for the white balance, which is absolutely fantastic, and that's going to affect our color depth. So the white balance right now is at a preset, and I can hit this button and tell the camera to adjust the white balance right now. You'll see that A in the lower left corner flashing as it's evaluating what it believes is white. And I really should be holding something white directly in front of the camera, right? Because it's basically basing the white off my gray shirt. And then I can also manually adjust that, or I can go to auto white balance. So the camera auto white balances, putting it at 3230K, which to me washes the colors out a little too much. So if I go back to the A preset, it's not much difference. I prefer the white balance at about 3510, me personally. And to get to that, I need to go to, oh, there's a button I have to press here. So there is auto white balancing again. It's still coming up to 3200. I wish I had a knob directly for that setting. And then there's a couple things I don't know what they are. This is some kind of zebra pattern that's used. I have no idea. I'm sure PhotoRay can explain it to me what that's for. And then there's another button over here that I press, and it gives me this scale of the image brightness, I'm guessing, which again, it's some kind of histogram, but how you use it, I don't know yet. This is getting into a deeper level of understanding, which I'm enjoying. Like, it's reinvigorated my interest in this side of it. And so I've got a bit of learning to do. But in the meantime, I can play with the buttons and knobs that, regardless if I understand them or not, and immediately see the change. So we can adjust how much white balance, if it's more red or green, and really make super fine changes on the red side and then on the blue side as well. And you'd think putting it right in the middle would be ideal. But in this case, these are at about the 11 o'clock or 11:30, just a little to the left of center. And just that little bit, I think, makes a pretty significant improvement on the picture quality. I can turn autofocus, as I mentioned, on or off with the press of a button. I've got iris control, that's the big knob here, and something called master pedestal, which is, again, another term I'm not familiar with, but I can play with it and see what it's doing. And it looks like the brighter the image gets, the more washed out the colors, and the flatter the picture looks. And the more I dial that down, the colors seem to pop a lot better. And again, looking at my shoulder and the background and how it's creating a distinction of depth. To mess with these settings in the menuing system of the camera, it's difficult. All right. So now, so what about things that are in the camera that there's no buttons for here? Well, again, I can bring up the entire camera menu, put it right up onto the screen, and this is exactly what I would see when I step behind the camera. So up at the top in orange, you'll see the picture of the camera, and then we can navigate through that. And if you look, there's like the main setting, and then below that, there are 8 pages of settings here under this one section. And then CP is your custom picture, where you can sort of set that up permanently in the camera here. Where the color space and the color matrix was something I was playing with. I don't think I've got this in HDR mode, and I will play with that later, but that made a really good improvement. I know OBS is using BT709 as the color profile, and there doesn't seem to be any way to change that. So this Canon camera has some other color profiles that would be used perhaps in production, but make my image quality look terrible. This is all about the media, the SD card, and once again we have 2 pages of settings here. The next one over is all about our audio, and here we've got 5 pages of settings dealing with the inputs and levels and sensitivity and the low cut filter and attenuation and the 1 kilohertz tone, the headphone volume level if you're going to plug headphones into the camera to monitor your audio, which audio channels do you want going out through the HDMI cable, etc., etc. The next section is that's going to be all about what we're monitoring, right? So that's the LCD screen. And again, you've got 5 pages of options to go through. Depending on which settings you're enabling or disabling may gray out other options as a result. This was where I was a little frustrated that the on-screen display output, when I was initially using this camera, I couldn't figure out how to get all the text off the screen. And then eventually figured out it was called OSD, or on-screen display output. And you can turn that on or off through either the HDMI cable or the SDI cable if you're using an SDI cable. So go back up here once more. Still a couple more items in the menu. This is what they call assistance functions, and that involves focus guide and magnification when you're focusing, or if you want it black and white during magnification, in case you don't realize you're actually not zooming but magnifying, and peaking levels for all the connectors and the internal LCD screen. That zebra thing, which I don't know what that does, so I'll have to learn about that. I don't know about these waveform settings. I'm not sure what they're for. And then there's markers that you can use, which, because we're not in a professional environment, we don't need to use markers. And then, of course, the aspect ratio for the markers. And then finally, there's a safe area marker, which again would be in a professional production where the cinematographer may be filming a larger scene than what's actually going to be processed. And you might notice that if you ever see a camera, like a professional studio camera, might have what looks like a Sharpie with a little box around it drawn into the monitor that the camera operator is using, that tells the camera operator what the safe area is, to know if they've got it in the frame. Back up to the top. The next setting over is going to be all the connectivity for connecting this to a network. This can work as an IP camera. I don't know why you'd do that, but you could point it to a browser and control some of the camera functions through a browser interface. However, you've got to change the network IP address on the computer to be the same as the camera. So it's a little convoluted the way they do it. And that's only one page for the network settings. And it's got Wi-Fi. So we go over it one more time here. We've got assignable buttons. This camera has buttons just like the XF400 and many of my Canon cameras before, that you can program which button you want to do what. So on the XF400s, they've got a little dial right underneath the lens at the front of the camera that you can spin, and you can set that dial to affect a specific menu function. And the one that I always want it to, that I configure it for, is to adjust my video gain. So if at any point my video is too dim or too bright, I can just reach out and just rotate that dial and immediately adjust the gain. It was something I was having to do frequently, and to just be able to reach out and do that was so convenient. But depending on how you use the camera, you can assign those buttons to the various repetitive tasks that you keep having to continually go into the menu and dig down for. And it gives you instant access, and you customize them to whatever it is you need to have quick access to. And now we've got 3 sub-menus here, which is all just, oh, this is the RC-V100, that's the remote settings. And we go back up, and the little wrench, this is going to give us all of the internal camera settings regarding how the camera is set up. So everything from the date and time, the menuing language, and you'll see there's 5 pages of all of this. I don't use time code, but it's really cool that we can use time code. I also think that the time code feature is on the XF400s as well. And then, yeah, you can key lock it so that if you hit the record button, nothing happens. Sort of lock the button. And options for reviewing the recording. We go down to like the fan option. And I would just set that to automatic. I don't think it has to always be on. And then there's one last one here, and that's the little star. And all that is really is just your favoriting menu items from different menus. different areas of the camera, and they're items that you're always going into and always changing. And so you can kind of take those particular settings in the menu, in the various areas of the menu, and put them over here into your favorite area. It doesn't move them. They're still going to be in the, the menu is still going to be the same. But instead of digging through all these different menus and submenus, if there are a number of items that you want to have quick access to, you can assign them here in whatever order you want, and you get 5 pages worth of them. So it shows page 1 of 5, and of course we're not using any of it. So that might be something I revisit, but that's all blank. And that's the entire menu system, and I can access all of it right here, which is so amazing. So now I can exit out of the menu, and I can turn the on-screen information off, and it's so painless. And I should be able to just get this configured and dialed in and then just set it aside. I shouldn't have to keep playing with it unless something significant changes in the studio. I'm also going to move the cameras a little more center, but it requires a bunch of other stuff off to my left that's in the way. And so the camera's just a little off to the right. And like I said, this whole process of getting the new cameras reinvigorated me and wanting to make improvements. And these aren't going to be massive improvements. They're going to be very subtle. They should be. And now that I have this remote and this camera, finally, I was worried I might have made a bad decision on this camera. And honestly, there's a part of me that wishes I would have got the 605 just because it's newer. Never mind that it's cheaper. However, as far as picture quality goes and the ability to control, there's no difference between the 605 and 705. And this remote also works on my XF400s, but I can only use it with one camera at a time. Also, the XF400s, some of these, I believe some of these buttons won't work because the XF400 doesn't allow for that change, but it doesn't matter. I really want to keep this tied to that camera. And let's take a look at your comments, because I've been full screen going through that menu and I haven't been able to watch the comments. Positive Gene said that control does look like fun, actually. Yeah, it's really cool. Nelson says Monoprice has the cable. If you can send me a direct link to that cable, or give me the part number, because I did a search on Monoprice and just a minute ago, all I saw were adapters. Is the remote a part of the camera? It's sold separately as an optional accessory to this camera. And it's compatible with other Canon cameras. Not all, but the higher end cameras that have that granular control of the image quality, that's what the remote's designed for. It's for a single operator, such as myself, to be able to be in front of the camera and also maintain or even if I had a producer, somebody who was monitoring the image, they could sit down away from the camera. Because anytime you're touching the camera, you're going to be bumping it and sort of moving the image a little bit, which is a little disturbing for most viewers. So by not touching the camera, the image stays steady, and then you can just focus on what you need to change without interrupting the broadcast. But it works out really, really well for me without a camera operator, that I have this control and I can dial that in. Because before, I'd walk behind the camera, flip the LCD and hit the mirror button, go into the menu, find the setting, adjust it, step around, look at the screen. I wasn't able to really watch it as I was changing it. So sometimes the changes were so subtle, I couldn't tell the difference. With this, now I absolutely can tell the difference. Lawn Dog said the adjustment that controls the color of your white back wall, the one that you're really going to have to look at, well, you want the wall to look. Lawn Dog said 2 minutes ago, when I came into the chat room, the wall looked really good. Now it looks a little gray. Yeah, I haven't quite figured out the manual white balance adjustment here beyond the presets or auto. So I'll get back to that in a minute. So I definitely don't have the white balance dialed in, nor do I have the audio necessarily dialed in. But I feel like I got everything else pretty well dialed in regarding all the other settings, the sharpness, the black gamma level. Yeah, so let's just keep looking here for feedback that I've missed. Hale sends a link to Amazon for, what is that? Mr. Rex 2.5 to 3.5 millimeter cable, 16 feet. Now, how did I not see that? Boy, that is nearly identical. Thank you for sending me that link. I'm going to keep that open because that's a great find. Yeah, that's exactly what I need. And it's the right color. This red cable is kind of brash against all my black camera equipment. Not that it's terrible. It's working and I'm thrilled, but at least I can now know that there is nothing special about this cable. And Canon, it's so insulting to me that, first of all, Canon would abandon all the customers that have bought this and say, that cable isn't sold separately. If you lose it, you've got a brick, too bad, so sad, goodbye. The least Canon could do, if they're not going to make the cable anymore, is authorize their customer service to direct me to, well, that cable that Hale just sent at Amazon. You know, it's nearly the exact same cable, and it sells at Amazon for $16.98 with free shipping. That's a far cry from $97 plus tax plus shipping. So look, if Canon really wants to persuade you to stick with Canon accessories, and they're going to exploit that by charging an exorbitant amount of money for what is just a regular old everyday cable, I feel like they owe it to their customers. If they're not going to make that cable that they're ripping people off on, in my opinion, the least they can do is direct them to an alternate source of an equivalent cable so that people can see it's a $17 cable, not a $97 cable. And what does Canon care anymore? If they're not selling it anyway, who cares? The customer's going to figure it out sooner or later, or they're going to abandon their Canon equipment because you've left them no choice. If you didn't offer them an optional solution, alternative, because you're no longer providing it, you're essentially telling your customers their investment was a bad investment and that you won't support your own products. So I was going to pay over $100 for that cable. I was ready to pay for it just to make sure that everything is all Canon. And that's what Canon wants you to do. So for Canon to then tell me they no longer make that cable and not offer me any solution suggests to me they don't give a rat's behind between a $7,500 camera and a $2,000 remote there's nearly $10,000 in equipment that I cannot use fully because of a simple cable. So I am so offended by that, but I want to let everybody know. I always know anything that's made for cameras charges more. Like if you wanted to get a green piece of cardboard, in that neon green people often use as a chroma key, even if I go to like Michael's or a fabric store and I want that shade of green, it's 3 times more than everything else. And that's, there was a piece of cardboard in that green I wanted. It was at Michael's, and it was like $16 or $20 for a piece of foam board painted green. All the other colors of foam board of the same size and dimensions were like $6. It was only the green one. So immediately when they know it's for use in photography or videography, price goes up. I thought by now that would have gone away. They're still doing it, so just know that. John Lewis says, thank you, Kerry, for your content. Right on, John. Thanks for hanging out. XRod666 contributed $10 via Super Chat. He says, hey, Kerry, nice to see you on this nice Wednesday night. Video is looking great. Thank you, XRod666, for your continued support and contribution. Bob R. said, is Canon's customer service in the USA? If you email customer service, I think you get somebody out of the country. I'm not sure. But when you call Canon's customer service, they are in the USA, and they're only open, you have to call within the operating hours. XRod wants to know if 4K was not working well for you. The problem was I was changing too much too soon, and so I got the new camera. I've got a 4K capture card. I've got the internet issue resolved, and I thought, let's go ahead and set up the new camera, adjust everything into 4K. That meant going and making a bunch of changes in OBS, and those changes were experimental. I wasn't quite sure. You know, I had to start somewhere. And about the 3rd or 4th broadcast at 4K, well, I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with the picture with this new camera, and the audio. It occurred to me that some of my issue might be the settings in OBS that I set it to with 4K, and I might be chasing my tail trying to fix an OBS setting, but instead focusing on adjusting camera settings. And about the 4th broadcast, my bandwidth got cut in half. I don't know what happened, but my normal upload bandwidth is 35 meg, and it dropped to about 14, and it stayed that way for about 3 days. And I was sending out at 17 meg per second, and 14 wasn't going to cut it. And I thought it would recover, that I thought it was temporary, because it had been working really, really well, really solid. And I don't know what happened, but I know I was consuming a lot more bandwidth, and I might have gone over a limit, and they might have reduced the speed because I went over the limit, or they might have been upgrading some equipment, or, I mean, there's a lot of different ors. So having the stream be interrupted because the bandwidth was no longer keeping up with the amount of data I was sending meant that all of you watching live were getting frozen screens, frozen audio, and then it would start again, and then it would stop again, and it would start again, and it would stop again. So in that case, it doesn't matter if I have the best picture quality if you're not able to actually see it. You know, I'd rather have a smooth, uninterruptible video with lower video quality than to have a superior video quality that's completely unreliable, and that's how YouTube is receiving it. So it's not as though you can wait till the stream is ended and then have YouTube process it. YouTube's going to process all of the stuttering and all of the lag, and it's going to replay it exactly like it aired. The only way around that would be for me to record either in the camera or locally to the computer, and then after the stream that's all messed up, upload that file and replace the live stream, which means I lose the live chat, but at least I didn't lose my content. So I said, you know what? I know better than this. I changed too much all at the same time. So I put OBS back the way it was, put everything back to 1080, and said, okay, let's make sure we got the upload issue fixed. Let's get the camera, audio, and video dialed in. That's going to take a while. With settings I know work with OBS and YouTube, let's go back to those proven settings. Then I can accurately fix or make better my image quality and audio quality. And once I'm satisfied that that's stable and good, then I can revisit 4K, because at that point, any image issues or any upload issues are all within numerous settings in OBS, and now I know exactly where to go to fix that. And if I can't fix it, then that means I simply don't have the bandwidth available to me. But what was happening, if I'm doing let's say a 3-hour live stream, whatever amount of bandwidth it's taking me to send this signal to YouTube, to send the data, I'm sending 4 times as much data for the exact same content in 4K. And so, first of all, you've got to make sure that your connection can sustain that level during a live broadcast of data transfer. Because if it can do it 90% of the time, but 10% it drops out, it's no good. And at the end of the day, it's still the same content, and I'm consuming more of my bandwidth. And at some point, if I exceed a certain amount of bandwidth in 30 days, then there's a word for it. But it's just like a cell phone data plan. When you exceed your cell phone data plan, they throttle your speed down to about 10% of what it normally is until your next billing cycle. And so the cable company here does the exact same thing. Now, if that was what happened, I mean, I don't know. But it was really making life much more difficult than it needed to be, because I was changing too much at the same time. And then I wasn't quite sure where to go to address the error. So that's why we're back to 1080, and then we'll revisit 4K. In the meantime, everything's still being recorded in 4K. As far as the camera settings, as you can see, it's all in 4K. The capture card's all in 4K, and OBS is taking in a 4K signal and converting it to a 1080 signal in OBS. I figure that'll make the 1080 picture better, but again, I'd have to experiment, change the camera to 1080, change the capture card to 1080, and tell OBS that the input and output are both 1080. I could be fooling myself thinking I'm getting a better image by giving OBS all this data, and that OBS make the best 1080 image out of that amount of data. So that'll be more experimentation. But for right now, everything is still in 4K mode except for what I'm sending to YouTube. See how complicated all this gets? It gets expensive, it gets complex, but the results, I think, are worth it. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm so really just kind of burned out with building the computers. I needed to do something different. I needed to do something to sort of, excite me. And this has absolutely done that. Everything from this stupid cable to playing with the remote, and now all of a sudden I'm excited for the possibilities and what else can I do to improve Studio B, move the cameras more to the left, move some other equipment around. That isn't anything that I'm too worried about making a big investment in, only to have to undo it when I have to leave. So it's little stuff. And it's such little stuff I couldn't be bothered with it because I had work to do. And now I want to do anything else but that work. I still have to do it, but that's why I'm broadcasting today. I don't normally broadcast on Wednesdays, but I was so excited to share this with you and get your feedback on some of the changes. I couldn't wait till tomorrow. Winter Mule says throttle. Yeah, that was the word I wanted. Thank you. Jerry Span said, if the problem lies within OBS, maybe us viewers can help you obtain better software. So I've looked into Streamlabs OBS, and I've looked into, and I've got a lifetime subscription to XSplit, but I really, really like OBS. And I don't think it's a problem with OBS so much as it's a problem with me configuring it properly, apart from its limitation on color interpretation. But that's an industry standard. The BT709, I think, is pretty much what all the television standards are. And if that's good enough for television, it should be fine for me. But I could probably find a way, if I'm not in HDR mode, that could definitely improve the color vibrancy by enabling that. I know on that little Sony R100 Mark VII, it was outputting in HDR, and the colors were definitely more vibrant. And I know there's a way to do it on this camera, and I don't think I'm doing that now. So there's still more room for improvement there. Long Dog said, by the way, you should know having 4K cameras and 4K uploads means we can see the whiskers that need to be shaped. I think he means shaved if we zoomed in. I don't think that's necessarily what we want to see. Agreed, but the idea is that when I'm filming a close-up of a motherboard and I want to point at some of the minuscule writing on the board, that you'll be able to actually see it better than you could see it if it were right in front of you in real life. And so for that clarity, it makes the lesson much more effective. And so in 4K mode, it's really, really beneficial when we're looking at the little tiny details on the circuit board or of the hardware itself that comes in, it comes in handy. It's extraordinarily helpful. I think it is. The downside of that is, of course, yeah, you're gonna see every flaw, whether it's a scratch on the desk or a scratch on my face, it's gonna be super clear and visible. If I've got a booger hanging out, oh, you guys are gonna see that perfectly, and I'm just standing here, I got no idea until I play it back and completely humiliated. But that's the risk I'm willing to take if it means that the educational content is more effective, more easily understood. It's worth it as a consequence to that. Channel 0 says, remember to check your Amazon gift cards. Well, let's check the phone. It's been a little bit here. Charles Brown contributes a $5 Amazon gift card from Channel 0 with DJ Lion and Jesse G. Right now, well, thanks you guys. I appreciate that very much. There's a cable I got to order, and $5 will help pay for that cable. Just made that cable a little cheaper. Now, I want to go back to adjusting this image a little bit. Alan Lindas in the chat asks, does the remote also tip the camera up and down? No, the camera's not on a motorized tripod head. And if it were, that's not made by Canon. That would be made by another manufacturer. And so those tripod heads that are motorized would come, if a remote was possible, it would come with the remote to allow you to rotate, tilt. Yeah, that would be the two knobs basically. One rotates and one tilts. I don't really see any need for that for me personally. The fact that I can zoom is fantastic. The way I get around that is I have two cameras side by side, essentially pointing at me. One, the main camera, is a wide angle shot. Camera 2 is right next to camera 1. And it would be the close-up. And I'm not utilizing that today, but I do sometimes turn that on. And it helps to emulate having a camera person here when I can just click a button in OBS and switch to that other camera. But again, I'm not doing that today, but that's how I work around the need for remote tilt and pan. I really would never use a remote tilt or pan in the kind of videos that I make, but they do exist, and they're part of the tripod head. Alan says, then the camera person is not being eliminated then. Well, you can't really replicate the benefits of having a person operate the camera. So the problem is I pretty much only have a camera operator on Fridays, and that's most of the time the only time I really need one. To have a camera operator for a video like this, you know, they would mostly be doing nothing, because there's really, you know, maybe they might focus in on the remote, or maybe they might focus in on the details on the screen, but really be a very boring job for them. So this is really for when the 90% of the time I make a video, I'm alone. And 10% of the time, I'll have, again, the reason Mitch even started off, getting to know Mitch was all about Mitch operating the camera for me during the build, which then later led to him joining me on camera, which then left me without a camera operator. So then he turns during portions of the video to grab the camera and do the close-ups while the other one was in front of the camera. So by having Mitch, when he joins me, to strictly be my co-host, to be my guest, enable me to continue to be the host, and then still have a camera operator, is always preferred than what I'm doing today, or the kind of videos I make when I'm alone. So I'm just super excited to be able to make these adjustments live. This is everything I wanted to be able to do. I've never, ever had this kind of control over the image quality of any camera in any menu. So the fact that this camera offers this level of control, and the fact that I can do it while I'm live and make those adjustments and instantly see the effect of those changes, that's all I was going for when I wanted to get this camera. I just didn't realize that it was going to. The best way that I learn is to just get into something. I don't want to study it. Just, you know, in the 1980s, you know, you just kind of, you had to make things work, and you had to use what you had to figure it out. And I realized using the internet and having information available at the touch of the keys, you know, just touch a few keys and the information's there, means you don't have to do it that way anymore. But I enjoy it. I really like it. So it's like playing a video game. I have to figure it out, and I enjoy that whole process. It's a lot of fun for me. So, you know, I've learned all of this because I needed to know it. I didn't know I needed to know it. So it's hard to prepare for something like that unless you're going to study it for months and know all the competition and the options and the benefits and the features and the costs and the accessories. I'm not interested in all that stuff. I just wanted another upgrade to the studio at the next level within the Canon family of products, and try and take it up as high as I can go. And from what I could tell, this was it. Didn't even know this was a thing, and didn't even know I would need it. But yeah, par for the course for me. It's just how I am. You know, there's this idea that being self-reliant and being able to use intuition and experience to figure something out, for me, is very fulfilling. I really enjoy it, including the frustration and including sometimes me going about things the hard way. But that's how the information stays with me. If it's something very quick that I looked up on Google and I set it, I'll never remember what that setting was or what I typed to find it. So this is just my preference, and I love the discovery of it. And I love discovering as I need to learn it. Now, if I were working for somebody else, this isn't acceptable, right? But just for myself, for just keeping myself entertained and occupied, yeah, this definitely has brought me brought my energy back up and got me excited again. And what's the harm in making the image quality and audio quality just a little bit better? Why not? Especially because it's a good excuse for me to buy it and play with it, because that's really what I want to do. The whole thing about making the audio and video better, it was fine before, you know. I just really wanted to play with this stuff. So it's just an excuse. But it does, it's not a lie. You know, it does improve the picture quality, and it can give me, you know, if I get these settings dialed in, a far superior picture than what I can get from any of the other cameras. Winston contributes $2 Canadian. Carrie Holzman Lucas Pixar Films is the next corp. Jason Urbank says, I think Canon relies on physical filters for better quality. Have you tried using physical filters for this camera? I haven't, and I'm not even sure what filter I would use. There are filters like anti-glare filters that would not affect me. There are gels if you want to change the color tint, which again, that's more of a cinematic thing. So I'm not aware of any filter that I would put on this camera that would benefit me in indoor shooting. But if you know of any, please let me know so I can look into it, because it's quite possible. So if I go back to my image here, I still want to go back because it's been bugging me on how to adjust that white balance. I wish there was a knob here specifically for that, but it looks like I'm gonna have to bring up a menu here. So let me bring the on-screen information back up here. And we're at 3200K Kelvin. And it looks like it's set to automatic for some, oh no, it's preset A is what that is. And I should be able, just trying to remember how I did this now. If I hit the shutter button, and that area lights up in orange, and while it's in orange, I should be able to go to the left. And there's our gain. Oh, it's not gonna take me all the way to the, oh, that's a bummer. So on the camera, that little orange box will move across the entire bottom, and that's how I can get to the, you know, you see a -3 cc on the bottom left. That's the -3 color correction, so we're toning the colors down a little bit. And I just have to find it here. I know there's a way to get to that. Why do I have the sharpness turned all the way down? Bring the sharpness up. That's ISO and shutter. Those buttons, again, I was able to move between them, so why they have individual buttons beside each other for that, I wish I had one for the white balance. I've got everything I need for the white balance for preset A, preset B, automatic, or setting. Automatically setting it using, you know, holding up something white. But what I don't have is a dedicated manual control. So what that means is I'll have to go into the menu, and I'll have to go to the first one here, which is the camera. And then somewhere in here, I think, white balance preset. Let's go down. White balance preset. Hit enter. All right, well, it's set to Kelvin, but it's not letting me adjust it here. Let's go to the next one over. Next one over. Next one over. It's in here somewhere. I'm sure there's probably an easier way for me to get to this. Let's definitely not in here. It's not audio related. It's definitely not monitoring, and it's not in here. It's not a connection. Is it under? Shouldn't be under here. These are all the camera settings internally. I know there's a way to adjust this. Those two options, the color correction and manually adjusting the Kelvin, I know how to get to them. Ironically, now I know how to get to it in the camera. And it was something that was annoying me because I have this whole area of this remote dedicated strictly for white balance. Like if I hit the auto white balance and let the camera do it, so right now the camera has adjusted it to 3230, and you'll see the AWB, which is over there, lights up and tells us the camera's doing its own definition of maintaining the white balance automatically using whatever interpretation of its circuitry. And I prefer the white balance to about 3510. I like it just a little bit up, and it also changed the color correction a little bit. So I think it looks better than it did, but not as good as when I dial it in manually. And I'm just trying to remember how the heck well, I know how to do it in the camera. I'm not quite sure. I have not figured out. I go to preset. No, that's not doing it. Can I adjust the preset here? So now that's adjusting it automatically and assigning it to the preset of B, but how do I refine that with the remote? That is the question. There should be a way I can do this. Is it custom picture? No, it's not here. That's something I'm going to have to figure out, because the correcting that value, adjusting that Kelvin for me, has always been superior to anything the camera's defining on its own. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, since I know how to do it in the camera, I'm just going to step around here real quick and set that. I'm absolutely positive there's a way to do that with that remote. I just wish it had a dedicated button, that's all. So I should be able to see how it's orange down there. No, it's not. Oh, I don't want to use a preset white balance. It's preset A. How do I configure that preset? I thought I hit the function button and move the joystick, but it's only giving me the gain and the shutter. It used to go all the way across, so maybe because I've got another camera feature enabled. Go back to the custom picture settings, and you guys should be seeing all this as I do it, but I don't think this is where I'm. Oh, maybe it is. White balance. Oh, red gain and the blue gain. Okay, so I don't. That is adjustable with the remote. There's the color correction. You can see there's just so much to play with here, which I don't even want to dive into today. So we'll get out of that. I know it's back here. Bear with me here just for a minute. So this isn't, I guess the reason this is happening is because I have the custom picture setting enabled. And if I turn the custom picture setting off, then it enables me to go over there to the left and adjust that color temperature. But there's still got to be a way to do it, and I'm just not familiar with what that process is yet. This drives me mad. I know exactly where I want it. I wanted it at 3510. That's where I've had it before that I thought it looked best. And it's right in front of me and I can't seem to adjust it. But it's in there somewhere. That's another little piece of me figuring this stuff out. Is it because I have auto iris turned on? Is that why? Nope, that ain't doing it either. All right, we'll put the auto iris back on again. Put the auto white balance back on. That brought it up a little bit higher. There should be a way for me to adjust these presets. There should be a way for me to define the presets, and I don't see where that's happening, only just that I can automatically adjust the automatic white balance to the preset with this button right here. So it measures it, and so if I were to say hold this up and do that again, yeah, it's 3230, whereas we go this way. See what that does. Now that brought it further down. $32.80. That brought it up a little bit more. It's getting us closer to where I wanted to be, but there should be a really easy way for me to just adjust it. It should take like 5 seconds. That looks pretty good though. I think it looks good. Got the shutter speed okay. Yeah, shutter speed looks good. Gain has stayed at 12. Color correction is set to 2. So apparently it's making that color correction adjustment when it's doing the white balance. And before, it seemed to me it was, those settings were separate. So something that I've changed is affecting how I'm setting the white balance from the way I was familiar with. So good enough. I think it's definitely improved. And I got to step back over here for just a second and flip this viewfinder back around. So ideally on this Friday's broadcast, we'll have a wonderful image quality. As for the audio levels, that's a little bit tougher because I'm looking at my audio levels and my normal speaking voice is a little low as far as the output. But when I speak louder, I am in fact peaking. But I can do a little adjustment here. On the audio gain. Now be aware, this is going to raise the audio up if you're wearing headphones. Okay, check 1, 2, check, 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 1, 2, check, check. That still seems a little bit low. Now before the new camera, the audio gain was at 17, and I had lowered it significantly when I started refining the audio. So my gain is now back at 17, and you can let me know if it's distorting or if it's better. In your opinion, how do you think of the audio now? To me, it still looks a little bit low, but if I say something loud, it is hitting into the red area, which should be about where we want it, but I can't hear it. You'll have to tell me. The Greek said, that picture's so nice, the color seems so balanced. The depth is perfect. I could reach in and take that Gatorade. Better not take my Gatorade. Ryan thinks the audio is still a little bit low. Lawn Dog says that white isn't white. Well, the walls are a shade of white, but I couldn't tell you what shade of white they are. But they're definitely not going to be the same color as the white around the browser of your computer. That's a really bright, glossy white. I don't know if they use glossy paint, flat paint, latex paint. I have no idea, but it's definitely not. When we say the word white, there are thousands of shades of white, from eggshell to whatever this color is. I can tell you from what I'm looking at on my screen, it looks like the exact same shade. But Dennis says, I'm on 1080, you look a bit fuzzy. Well, again, I had the focus on manual, and so I probably don't have it dialed in perfect. So I bet you if I just hit the autofocus button right now, let me know if that corrects the fuzziness. Dennis says, yes, that fixed it. Yeah, so one of the great things about being able to control that focus manually is when I am moving around, if I lock the focus, then every time I come back to this position, it should be perfect. But when I move up to the camera and I want to show you something and I'm trying to hold the item in front of the camera so that the camera focuses on it, it can be maddening sometimes. Now with this camera, it's much better. But to just reach over and grab the focus ring and rotate it, I can instantly dial it in much, much faster. But then I don't know how to dial it in from over here, except now that I've got the remote, I could. But I'm only watching the image on a portion of my screen, whereas you guys are getting the full image. So you guys are going to see things in much more detail and clarity than I'm seeing them, unless I go full screen, which I sometimes do. But when I do that, I can't see the chat room anymore because I've got full screen video, right? But it's showing me all the detail. And because I wasn't in full screen, on a smaller screen from 15 feet away, it looked in focus to me. So that's the kind of feedback is very useful to me. And that just lets me know, leave that setting on auto because the focus is doing a better job than I am until I get more practice with it. But it's nice to know that is now an option for me that's far more practical than it ever was, ever before. Dave Hall said crystal clear on focus. Right on. Thanks for the feedback, Dave. Jason Urbank says you might need a frequency analyzer since you're using a microphone setup that has multiple links. You have to set the volume at each link and start at the microphone. Yeah, I mean, there's probably more I can do to improve the audio quality, but at that level, it's out of my wheelhouse. So whatever that means you just said is probably something that would improve the audio, but I have no idea how to go about doing that. And so my interest, specifically today and in the days forward is to really dial in the video and the audio to the best that I know how on both sides. Obviously, somebody who is more knowledgeable with cameras or with audio, I'm sure can make improvements beyond what I'm doing here. So yeah, I'm glad we got that focus issue, because if it's out of focus, the white balance, the color correction, the sharpness, suddenly none of that matters anymore. If it's slightly out of focus, it ruins the whole image. So, things when we're dialing in the shade of white or certain audio improvements are sort of putting the cart before the horse if we don't have a good solid in focus image. The same with the OBS at 4K, right? If those OBS settings were not ideal for a 4K image to begin with, then I'm driving myself mad making adjustments to the camera that will not fix the problem that's in the settings of OBS that I have to toy with. So I have to start with a known good image, have all that ironed out, so that when I do go into 4K and make those OBS settings changes, and there's a lot of them, it's not just one little thing I'm changing, that if it degrades my image quality, I know exactly that the problem is in the OBS somewhere in those settings, and to not mess with the camera settings or the audio settings. And so that's why I will revisit the 4K thing after we've got but I'm real happy with my audio and video quality. And if I want to revisit the 4K, because even dialing that in may result in me consuming so much bandwidth that I get throttled by the ISP. So, yeah. John Studley said, Uncle Kerry, the picture and audio is 100% perfect from my end. Well, I'm glad you think so. I still think there's room for improvement on it. But as long as I'm making progress, as long as I'm not making it worse, if I can make it just a little bit better, that's all I'm going for today. And then if I make it a little bit better later on and just keep polishing and refining until I get it dialed into any change I make after that always results in making it worse, then I'll know my peak or my apogee. I'll know that's it right there. That's the pinnacle. And leave it alone. And let me get a colder Gatorade. This one got warm on me. If you guys have any questions, technical questions for me, I'll do my best to provide you an answer or direction. If you're interested in this camera stuff, I can't recommend highly enough that you check out the videos that MarkusPix makes. And he's got a lot of videos out there and they've really helped me. Not all of his content is of a subject matter that's beneficial to me, but he's still very enjoyable to watch. The videos are free, and he provides a lot of in-depth information that I feel is very well grounded and not just all cold and analytical, but actually practical, relatable, and understandable. And for that, I truly appreciate it. So if you want to learn more about this at a deeper level, go check out the videos over at MarkusPix. I have a link to the video comparing the XF605 to the Sony R100 Mark VII. And I think that's a great example of the kind of content you can expect from him. He's very, very good and very knowledgeable. The Greek says, I need your Amazon address to send you an Amazon gift card. So to send an Amazon gift card, you would just use my email address, which is carrie@carrieholzman.com, right there on the screen for you. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Jerry says, do I utilize any type of studio lights? I do, Jerry, and in fact, the studio lights have a brightness control, and they have another dial to control whether you want the light to be more blue or more yellow. If you want the light to be more blue, it's considered to be colder, and if you want it more yellow, that you want it to be warmer. So I did have these lights previously all the way cold because they're brighter, and I wanted to create as much brightness as I could in Studio B here. But with this new camera, it looked too blue. And then I realized this camera doesn't require as much light, and then went back and started rotating the dial more towards, so the dial by default would be in the center between cold and warm. I had it all the way to cold because it really brightened the room. But with this camera, with the image being, the colors just were cold. It occurred to me, I can adjust these lights, and so I adjusted them, instead of being all the way to the cold side, I've adjusted them back past the middle point between cold and warm, and a little bit more towards the warm side. So there's a little bit more yellow in the lighting, but it also results in sort of a dimmer, less brightness in the room. And unfortunately, there's no other space to put any more lights. If I had more lights, it wouldn't make any difference because there's nowhere to put them. In a proper studio, if I was in a proper studio, I would have fixed lights mounted preferably mounted up at the ceiling so they wouldn't get in the way. Right now they're just on C-stands, but they've made a massive improvement to the lighting here. So again, I appreciate the feedback and your opinions on the video clarity and the audio clarity, and adjust where I believe I can adjust. We've been live now for a little over 2 hours, so I think I'll go ahead and wrap up today's video. Just was super excited to get this out and start toying with it. I know I can set that white balance manually. I have to figure out I have to go back and I'll probably end up just Googling it, you know, and that'll probably lead me to an answer within seconds. I'm sure it's really, really simple. I wish it was as simple as everything else was here. But again, even where it's at is very, very close to where I set it. We're only about, and normally I would put it at about a 3510 on the Kelvin, 3510K. And what I say we were at 3230, 3280. So I don't know that bumping it up that extra 230 Kelvin would really make that much of a difference. I'll probably just make a note of it. I'll write down 3280 Kelvin, and then I will figure out how to change it back to 3510, which is where I preferred it. And then I'll hear your feedback, and I'll know I've got to be somewhere in there, right? But this 3280 Kelvin looks like it's pretty close to dead on. Colors look right. The yellow in the lightning bolts If anything, it's a little more yellow on screen than it is in real life. But that may be also because the color correction was cranked up a little bit, right? Didn't it say it was on a +2 on the color correction? Yeah, it's +2 on the color correction. And just turning the color correction to flat might resolve the brightness of that yellow. But I don't know that that's a problem. I actually kind of like it. One Dog said, I think it's great that you've invested in lights that have an adjustment. Oh, that was a long time ago. These lights, initially when I was first in Studio B, it was just dark. I just knew there was no way I could film in here without additional lighting. And I spent about $600 on lights and the C-stands. And yeah, those have worked out really well these last couple of years. So it's the same lights I've always had in here. Turn on the neon, Bryant says. Okay, yeah, we can turn that on. I got to plug it in. We've had a lot of storms, and I was warned by the company that made this neon sign that the most common repair they have is because you've left it plugged in during an electrical storm. And they recommended either plug it into a surge protector that you can, physically power off, or at least keep it plugged into a surge protector. I just plug it straight in the wall. I'm like, I don't care. So let's see what that looks like. It's gonna be like shining a light into the lens, so let's see what happens. Yeah, it's really, really bright. And so that's where the ND filter could come in handy, right? So if I hit the ND filter button, look at the difference that makes. It's pretty cool. Could be a good way to sort of fade out of a video to say goodbye to everybody and just, hit that ND filter and just leave it. Whoops. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the darkest. 1, 2, 3. Right there. Wow, that's really cool. All right, that was fun. Dom says it shows off my gray hair. Well, pretty soon it'll be showing off my bald head. So enjoy the gray. The new camera shows off my bald spot. Good, I want you to really see that. Mission accomplished. It's when I feel the back of my head, I don't feel a spot where there's, the way it looks on camera and how it feels is very different. There's no point in my touching bare skin. It's all hair. It's just, for whatever reason, right back there, it's thinning. So I can't tell by feeling it. It feels no different than any other part of my head. It looks like on camera, it looks like there's a big bald spot. In a way it is, but the problem is that the amount of hair that's there's not as much there, but it's still covering it. I still feel it. So how it feels and how it appears is very different. And even in person, you can see it. But when I feel it, it doesn't feel any different than it's felt my whole life. There's still hair. You'd think you'd feel a bald spot the way it looks, like you'd feel a spot where you just feel skin. I don't. Everything feels exactly the same as the rest of my head. Welcome to getting older, man. It's sort of a reward or a souvenir some of us get as we age. And if you don't age, if you die younger, well, you won't ever achieve that. So it's all in how you look at it. Bryant Burns contributes $2. Thanks, Bryant. Richard Palmentier says he's telling Dennis Speak for yourself. I'm Native American. I don't have that problem. He's got a full head of hair. Is that what he's saying? Yeah, go ahead, rub it in. If you look at earlier pictures of Elon Musk, he had some pretty major hair loss going on. And now all of a sudden, he's got a full head of hair again. So I wonder what he did. It's not that important to me. I really don't care. If I was 20 years old and it was happening, or if I was 30, you know. But being my age, it's to be expected. And you know, maybe one day I'll start a video and I'll have a completely shaved head because I'll just get sick of it. I'll just have stubble, and the stubble beard, I'll go with that Jason Statham. You know who Jason Statham is? Maybe I'll go for that Jason Statham look. Might surprise you one day. Patrick Manny just became a member for 4 months here on the channel. He says, I have all my hair, but it's all white now. Oh, I thought you were going to say you keep it in a jar by the side of the bed. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for joining our tech club here. Carrie, you can try a DSP for the audio. I use mini DSP 2x4 unbalanced model. They do have an XLR model that I cannot find anymore. So I have something for the audio. I bought it a long time ago, and I haven't made it a part of the system yet. But the Zoom F6 was something that I used Amazon gift cards to buy specifically so I can improve my audio quality. But I just haven't gotten around to it yet. And there's no convenient place for me to put this, and it's going to be a mess of cables. So when I get, my plan is, when I get a desk back here, some kind of a small desk that I can set the streamer on and put all this stuff over here, back behind me where it should be, then I will get that F6 hooked up, and instead of routing my microphones through the camera as I do now, I'll route them through that F6, which also has a 32-bit, what's that called? Floating. Anyway, I should be able to really refine the audio in a much more professional way once I get that utilized. So I have it. In fact, I've had it about 2 years, and I started to play with it, and I got really overwhelmed reading the documentation. This thing has menus upon sub-menus and all kinds of settings, and I'll just have to be in the right mood to do it. And right now, even if I was in the mood to do it, the cables are all going to sort of interfere with my work area here. So I don't have any place to put it. So once I have a place to put it, then I'll start to play with it and get it hooked up. So I do believe that it's going to make a massive improvement to my audio, for sure. $50 comes in from Bryant Burns. He says, does that take care of your cable? And then some, Bryant, thank you. Of course, YouTube takes 30% of all the Super Chat contributions. So that's about $35 I'll get out of your 50. So do know that if you, and it doesn't bother me, but I just want you to know that if you wanted me to have all 50, an Amazon gift card will give me all 50. But any Super Chat contribution, YouTube takes 30% of it, and they also make me wait about somewhere between 30 and 60 days before I get the money, and whereas the Amazon gift cards are instantaneous. So I really appreciate your contribution, and it's absolutely, you know, I have a lot of gratitude and appreciation for it. But I just want you to be aware that if you choose to contribute larger amounts through Super Chat, that YouTube will take 30%. And if you're okay with that, I'm okay with it. But if you didn't know, that's for you to decide. But thank you so much. Hey, Holly wants to know why I stopped using RTX Voice. Any special reason? I was using RTX Voice and completely forgot I had it on. And I was doing something with the audio one day and I turned it off. And we were in a live video and I was asking people, people had mentioned they were not able to hear my electric screwdriver for months. So if I had my back turned, or the RTX voice did such a great job, it filtered that sound out. I had no idea that was happening. And that's not a sound I want to filter out. I want you to hear that screwdriver so you understand, that it's more like you're in the room. And so we did a live video where I started experimenting with the noise suppression, and this was at Studio A. And I asked people in the chat, do you like it better with the noise suppression off and you have all this ambient noise, or do you like it better with the RTX voice on, where you're only hearing my voice, you're not hearing anything else? And I would say it was almost 50-50. Nearly half of the chat room preferred one way and the other half preferred the other way. But what the people said is what was my deciding factor for what to choose. And that is, the people said that the ambient noise makes it feel more like we're in the room with you. And so when you turn that RTX voice on, there's it changes the feel of your video. It doesn't feel the same. And because I like to keep everything transparent and as realistic as possible, I was like, you know what? That's a very good point. I absolutely want that ambient noise in there. And as much as that there are mistakes or things I misspeak in a live video, it happens. That's life. And so to keep with the transparency and the honesty, I felt like the noise suppression was a major part of, or rather disabling the noise suppression was a major component to the atmosphere that I was trying to create, which is that you're here with me. And it really bothered me that I was not aware that for months, every time I used my electric driver, people were not hearing it. I had no idea, and it totally makes sense. So for that reason, RTX voice is done. Right now, there's some air conditioner noise you're going to hear. We're in August. It's Phoenix. It is the most hot, humid month of the year. Of all the months of the year to live in Phoenix, this one is the worst. It is just uncomfortable. It's humid, it's hot, and we're going to go through a whole month of this. And I always know it's coming, and I always hate it when it's here. I'm glad we're a third of the way through August. I can't wait to get into September. And as we get into November, the air conditioner will probably be off and the audio won't have any background noise anyway. But there's no way I'm working without the air conditioner on, just because it avoids the ambient noise. And I don't want to turn the RTX voice on and then cut out all the sounds of the tools. So that's the logic I use. And that's how we got here. Greek says, I helped cover your cable. You did, and I thanked you for it. In fact, as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to order that cable. That's better than my plan, which was to just get an extension. That cable seems perfect, so yeah. I'll be glad to get rid of this red one. I might just send that back to Amazon anyway. Once we get the audio and video improved, then I'll revisit the 4K. But the 4K settings in OBS, there's a lot of settings there, and I need to be able to know that if I have an image or if I have an audio or video quality problem at 4K, right now with all the new equipment, I don't know where the problem is at. I don't know if it's in OBS, if it's in the camera. So once I get all of the camera adjustments and audio adjustments fine-tuned, if I'm going to revisit 4K, I'll do so at that time. 90% of you from the feedback I got did not care about 4K. I've seen a number of questions about the 4K here that are out of sync from what I was seeing when I was broadcasting in 4K. Overall, the vast feedback, 9 out of 10 people said, makes no difference to them and it's not important and they don't care. Now suddenly in this one live stream, I've had about 30 or 40% of you asking about the 4K. And I don't know if it's just because you're curious or because that mattered to you. So I find that a little bit surprising that how many times that's come up today. But that's why, you know, we're back at 1080 until I get this stuff dialed in. And in that way, when I do try 4K again, if there's any video or audio image settings, quality settings, I'll know it's in OBS. Like I said, there's so much in OBS that have to be changed for the 4K broadcast, and it has to be fine-tuned to your bandwidth and your camera equipment, the kind of videos that you're making. So it's not like I can just write some numbers down, you know, copy them from somebody else. CCTV user wants to know if I update OBS. Yeah, if there's an update for OBS, I don't mess with the beta, but the minute it's released, I'll have it the same day. Yeah. Yeah, I saw the screen go black there a minute ago. I don't know what that was all about. But all right, well, let's go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks you guys again so much for your feedback and for the contributions from Brian Burns and Patrick Manny and Mark Baggett, who just became a member today. Thank you for joining us, Mark. Winston Liu, as well as XRod666 and Alan Lindus for your contributions. Jimmy McGregor and Mark Gaines also became members today. Thank you guys so much for becoming members of the channel. And again, the feedback on the video quality and being able to share some of this fun little gadgetry with you to give you an idea of the complexity of what's going on behind the scenes, I think can help gain an appreciation for the amount of effort that's going on just to make the videos possible. I think a lot of people oversimplify what I do. They think I just hit a button and start recording, and that there's no preparation or anything. And as you can see, the preparation can take hours. The stuff with audio, I have to put headphones on and I have to listen to it and adjust it to where I think it needs to be, and it's a hassle. So with your feedback today, I've made some adjustments to the audio, but eventually I'll get in the mood and I'll get my headphones and I'll plug them in. I have to go to OBS, I have to turn the monitoring on, and then dial it in that way, which is not something I would do live. Turning the monitoring on can create a feedback loop, and it's horrible screeching sound. So I'll do that off stream. But again, it's good hanging out and interacting with everybody today, and thanks for all your support and your contributions, and Channel Zero with the Amazon gift card. And yeah, I want to go order that cable while I'm thinking about it, and then probably send this cable back. Or I might just hold on to it as an emergency spare. It's only 10 bucks. I probably should just keep it as an emergency, just in case. Like I say, this thing is a brick without a stupid cable. And I really, really wanted the original Canon cable. So Canon had, it was this close to making basically $100 free and clear in profit for a simple little cable that I would have happily paid for. So disappointed in Canon. If this was an obsolete product that was no longer sold, that would totally make sense. But the fact that I can go and buy one of these right now, and it, you know, the cable is what comes with it. To not be able to provide that cable separately for anybody who's damaged or lost a cable from a prior purchase for a piece of equipment that's this much money, and a cable that's so basic and cheap to make, it's a high profit item. I don't know what Canon is thinking. It's very disappointing though. But that's where we're at. So yeah, I think the picture looks pretty good. So when we're live on Friday, as I am every Friday at 1 o'clock Pacific time, this will be our starting point for our image. All the lighting in here should be exactly the same. Again, if I'm in the mood, I might grab my headphones and turn on the monitoring and make some more audio adjustment. But it should be better than it was, thanks to your feedback. And at the very least, if we just leave everything alone, this will be the settings at the very minimum that we'll have moving forward. So, fun stuff. Thanks for hanging out. Be sure to check out MarkusPix YouTube channel. Also, if you want more live interactive tech, be sure and check out Doug Bett's YouTube channel. What else can I recommend to you? If you're into cars and you like weird cars, there's a guy who's got a YouTube channel. This guy, Robert Dunn, has a YouTube channel called Aging Wheels. And this guy knows about electronics, like he's taken the speedometer apart off a dashboard and taken it down into pieces and repaired it. He's got some electric cars, and he's dealing with the electronics on those. The mechanics, the engines, and the repairs. The suspension and steering, he knows all about that. The interior, the seats. Like, he's just got all these skills. And he's got chickens, he knows all about chickens. And he's into woodworking, so he's got all this woodworking equipment. And he's just a guy that's sort of self-reliant on everything from mechanics to electronics to woodworking and chickens. He's very enjoyable to watch. So you might check out Aging Wheels if you're looking for some other content as well. He's absolutely, he does a great job. He's obviously working by himself. He doesn't have a camera operator. He has some amazing editing techniques, as does MarkusPix. They put a lot more effort into making their videos than I do. And as a result, they don't have videos that come out as often as I do, because they have to film it and then edit it and polish it. For me, I can at least get the camera settings dialed in, get the audio dialed in, and just go live and just keep cranking out content after content that isn't as polished and refined as theirs. So if you're looking for something a little different, but also very similar, Aging Wheels, MarkusPix, and more like this, check out Doug Bett's. And I'll be sure that I add the links in the notes below the video, so you guys can click right there to check them out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being members and being moderators. It makes the chat room so much more pleasant for me. I'll look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon. And until then, bye for now.